A 6-year-old was forced out of her car, down onto the pavement, and held at gunpoint, all because an AI-powered camera misread a license plate. And the cops treated the alert on that license plate like it was the gospel truth.
I've been trying to find this vehicle because it keeps hitting the LPR. It's a stolen vehicle. Now it's showing as a motorcycle.
The SUV, it wasn't stolen, but cops still forced little kids down onto hot pavement, all because AI told them to do it. And that system, it's now being used by over 4,000 police departments across the country to track cars in real time without their consent and without a warrant. I'm Jeff Hampton, the People's Lawyer, and in this video, I'm going to show you, number one, how police and flock safety have teamed up together to build a nationwide surveillance system. Number two, how this system is being used right now to stalk ex-girlfriends, track innocent people, and actually turn routine traffic stops into deadly encounters. And number three, we'll talk about how you can fight back so that you don't become the next false hit. So how exactly did these children end up face down, crying on asphalt during a routine traffic stop? In August 2020, Brittany Gillum was on a girls' day out with her 6-year-old daughter, teenage nieces, and sister. They parked at a shopping lot so one of the girls could get her nails done. Suddenly, multiple police officers swarmed their SUV. Officers with guns drawn ordered everyone out of the vehicle and forced the children as young as 6 years old to lie face down on hot pavement. They even handcuffed a 12-year-old and a teenager. The children were sobbing in terror, and Brittany Gillum had no idea what was happening until an officer explained that a license plate reader had tagged her car to show she was driving a stolen vehicle. In fact, the SUV was not stolen at all. This AI-powered license plate reader had misread her Colorado plate as matching with a Montana plate with similar lettering on it that was a hit on a stolen motorcycle. The police then went on full felony stop mode, pulling everyone out of the car with guns drawn. The cops finally figured out they got it wrong, but not before these little kids were severely traumatized. In fact, one news agency reported that this 6-year-old little girl still asks frequently if police are going to show up and shoot her for no reason. If a single alert can put an innocent family at risk at gunpoint on the side of the road, what happens when you unleash thousands of these cameras all over our cities? So what are we talking about here? Have you ever seen these innocuous white boxes perched on poles or traffic lights? They're not just ordinary traffic cameras, they are high-tech automatic license plate readers, watching and logging our every drive. And the surprising part is they don't even belong to the police. A startup by the name of Flock Safety, valued at nearly $8 billion, has installed thousands of these cameras across the United States, creating what one report calls, quote, the most comprehensive vehicle tracking database in American history. If you own a car and drive anywhere in the US, there's a good chance you're already in their database. Police, through the use of this system, can actually search for almost any car's movements and get responses back in seconds. They can even set up the system where they're triggered to receive automated alerts. Flock Safety and the police, they call it Safer Streets. I call it a database of all of your driving history, able to be searched by police or anyone else Flock Safety partners up with at the split second of a request, all without a warrant and without your consent. So, if these AI cameras are already watching you, who exactly is using them? As of 2025, over 4,000 law enforcement agencies and nearly 1,000 private companies, from retail chains to hospitals, are using Flock's license plate reader systems. Local police departments, sheriff's offices, big box retailers, shopping malls, homeowners associations, and even your schools have signed up to use them. The pitch from Flock Safety is very simple. You pay a subscription fee of about $2,500 per camera. In exchange, you receive real-time crime-solving superpowers. In fact, you can receive real-time alerts when a hot list license plate is spotted, and you can have a searchable database of a history of information for any license plate that passes by that particular camera. Flock CEO Garrett Langley, he's upfront of exactly what their mission is. He says, and I quote, to eliminate crime by blanket monitoring all neighborhoods. You combine their mission with millions of dollars in venture capital, you now see that Flock's network is growing at warp speed. And here's the shocking part. In recent years, Many people in cities have reported that they've seen these flock safety license plate reader devices springing up all over the place, all over streets. In fact, I just had one that I saw installed in an area I live in rurally in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and it was brought up overnight. And I looked into it, and what did I find out? It was never debated by the city council. Local officials didn't even know it had been installed. But what's been sold to us as a cutting-edge public safety tool has now resulted in mass civil rights violations and a loss of your privacy. Now, we've already determined that police teaming up with flock safety to use this technology against you has led to innocent people being held at gunpoint. But before we unpack what you can do to protect yourself and maybe change some of the legislation that's out there right now, let's unpack exactly how this technology works. Flock's AI license plate readers are a solar-powered AI-enabled camera that can be mounted anywhere and read license plates automatically. Police departments, they absolutely love it. By 2021, in places like Wisconsin, overnight cameras started popping up everywhere, according to one police chief. Unlike the older license plate readers from the old technology, they could only be mounted on a few patrol cars. But Flock now sells not just a camera, they sell a network. Multiple stationary cameras blanketing an entire town, all feeding into a cloud database. So what exactly do these cameras do? Each Flock camera snaps a photo of every vehicle that passes day or night. The system's artificial intelligence then extracts the license plate number and over 24 other attributes. Things like the car's make, model, color, any roof racks, or maybe political bumper stickers, aftermarket wheels, damage, and more. Flock even markets this as a unique vehicle fingerprint technology. In other words, even if you have an obscured plate or no plate at all on your car, officers can still search this database based upon make, model, and other attributes. Each sighting of your car is then tagged with time and GPS location, then sent over cellular networks to Flock's cloud servers. From there, police can instantly search a vehicle and find all the other places any other Flock security camera has spotted that vehicle driving around. But what if your license plate is on a quote hot list? What would qualify for a hot list? Maybe something like associated with a stolen car, a wanted fugitive, an Amber Alert, or any other custom list an officer might want to upload. At that point, every time a vehicle passes by a particular camera, the officers will receive real-time ping updates on the network, letting cops know exactly where you are at any given moment. It's as if a GPS tracking device were affixed to every car, except owners never consented. Officers can then pull up a map and retrace a car's movements across towns or across state lines, depending on data sharing. In fact, Flock proudly states that officers can access over 17,000 cameras nationwide via their network effect. What about police departments that don't have any Flock security cameras in their area? Well, all they have to do is sign a security agreement and Flock will let them search their entire database. You say, wait a minute, Jeff, won't this help solve more crimes? Well, it possibly could, but it also violates your privacy rights, your constitutional rights, because cops are tracking your every move. But if this isn't enough, what I've covered so far is not actually the reason why cops love this technology so much. Police really love the cloud platform from Flock and all of the AI analytics behind it. You see, Flock Safety's new product, called Flock Nova, it goes way beyond license plate readers. In fact, Flock Nova combines license plate reader hits with things like 911 dispatch logs, criminal databases, even personal data to quickly ID not just a vehicle, but the person actually associated with the vehicle. In fact, an internal presentation from Flock, all of their leadership, they were presenting one to another, they said, and I quote, that an investigator could, quote, jump from a license plate reader hit to a person and understand context, link to other people related to it through marriage or even gang affiliation, creating a very powerful linking of an individual's network. And here's the shocking part. In one internal meeting, Flock Safety actually said and discussed using hacked data from the dark web, like a breached parking app's user information, to bolster Nova's person tracking capabilities. And to tell you what type of company this is, it was only after bad press hit them with this release that Flock decided, oh, no, never mind. We're not going to take breached data or hacked data and use it to feed our AI. You say, okay, Jeff, you're telling me what this AI does. You're telling me that cops use this, but is there anyone else? Let's talk about retailers. Investigative records show major chains like Home Depot, And Lowe's, they have flock cameras at hundreds of their stores, and they're actively sharing that data with police agencies. In one Texas county, the sheriff's office could tap into flock feeds from over 173 Lowe's parking lots nationwide, and dozens of Home Depot cameras, essentially turning retail parking lots into law enforcement lookout points. Let me ask you, do you ever remember being told that when you decided to pull in and buy some lumber at Home Depot or Lowe's, that your license plate would now be fed into police databases? I want you to think about how dangerous this is. When you find big box retailers partnering with cops to spy on all of us, it is now creating a force multiplier for government surveillance without any accountability. Oh, and when you now consider the fact that Flock also uses gunshot detection microphones for some of their license plate readers, and it has been shown that they're using them with some of these Home Depot and Lowe's locations, you can guarantee that they're not only looking at license plates, but they're cross-referencing any audio and video they can obtain to gather as much data as possible at all of these locations. But I have to stop because this brings up a bigger question. Who actually owns all of this data? All of this data, location histories, plate scans, audio, video, it doesn't sit on a police server, it sits on Flock's servers. Police, they don't own the data, they merely pay for access to the data, which is part of how they're able to get around this under the third-party doctrine. But if you take a look at Flock's standard contract language, it explicitly notes that the agency, not Flock, owns the data. But then they immediately grant Flock a, quote, perpetual, irrevocable, worldwide, fully paid license to use and share that data as part of aggregated data. In plainer terms, Flock gets a copy of everything and they can do whatever they want with it as long as all the data is pooled into an aggregate pool. And here's the crazy part. Flock's fine print in their contract language makes police acknowledge that Flock is not, quote, liable for any inaccuracies or corruption of data in its system, and that in an emergency, quote, the customer should contact 911 and should not rely on the services. Think about that for a second. Flock sells this as a life-saving, crime-stopping tool, but then when it breaks, they say, whoa, we're not liable for that. Don't rely on us in an actual emergency, call 911. Well, what if you want to break the code of Flock's AI system and find out exactly what it's doing so that you can reverse engineer it? Watch out, because all of their contract language says, and I quote, decompiling, disassembling, or otherwise attempting to obtain the source code, and even from, quote, tampering with or repairing the camera equipment. Essentially, it's a black box. Plug it in, trust us, we're the experts, don't mess with it. So we now have a private company partnering up with cops to watch your every move from coast to coast. No warrant required. No individualized suspicion. So what exactly is happening to our rights? Well, we've all seen this rerun before. Almost every time we see a private company partnering up with cops, it creates a privacy nightmare and we end up seeing wrongful arrests taking place everywhere. Headlines are shouting at you from every direction. Bias, censorship, outrage. It's overwhelming. So how do you cut through the noise and find out what's really going on? That's where Ground News makes a difference. Ground News gives you the freedom to discover for yourself whether what you are reading is unbiased and fair, so that you can come to your own conclusions. Isn't that what the news is supposed to be about? Check them out for yourself at groundnews.com/Hampton. Let's take the recent news story that John Cornyn revealed the FBI has agreed to both locate and arrest Texas Democrats who left the state this month to block voting on redistricting legislation. As we analyze the coverage in Ground News, the top right displays key details, the number of sources reporting, their political bias breakdown, reliability ratings, and ownership info. These insights show how outlets across the spectrum are framing the same event differently. One of the most powerful features of Ground News is the headline comparison, where we can see for ourselves how different news outlets are framing the story. By clicking on the left, center, and right, we can observe the language and tone used, allowing us to draw our own conclusions. For instance, a left-leaning headline might focus on threats to democratic norms, while a right-leaning headline might emphasize enforcing the law. But my favorite feature is the blind spot feed. With blind spot, you can see news stories that are disproportionately being covered by one side of the political spectrum. In our polarized environment, I have found this feature to be an amazing way to discover stories I would have never seen because only one side is talking about them. It's also perfect for better understanding friends and family who think and see things differently. The best part? Ground News has a special offer for my viewers. If you sign up through my link, you'll get an amazing 40% off the Vantage plan, the same plan I use to get unlimited access to all features. Go to ground.news/Hampton to give it a try for yourself. Click the link down in the description or scan the QR code to stay better informed and transform how you read the news. But now is the time where you might want to stop me and say, Jeff, okay, you've made me angry enough about all of this, but isn't this illegal? And I'll agree with you. It definitely violates the spirit, if not yet the letter of the Constitution. In the landmark 2018 case of Carpenter versus United States, the Supreme Court ruled that the long-term tracking of an individual's movements through a cell phone violated their privacy rights. The court specifically said that cops accessing a detailed days or weeks-long log of someone's locations, quote, provides an intimate window into a person's life, revealing not only his particular movements, but through them his familial, political, professional, religious, and sexual associations, such that these records, quote, hold for many Americans the privacies of life. So Carpenter taught us that if cops really want to go this far, they generally must obtain a warrant supported by probable cause and signed by a judge. But unfortunately, Carpenter only dealt with phone GPS data, not license plate readers. But to me, the principle carries over. I still have an expectation of privacy in my private movements, even in a public place. As Electronic Frontier Foundation explained, it's one thing to be spotted in public at a given moment, but it's another thing to be automatically tailed and recorded everywhere you drive. In fact, the Supreme Court in United States versus Jones back in 2012 covered this exact issue by saying cops can't just slap a GPS device on your car and track you all over the place without a valid search warrant. But license plate reader systems like Flock Safety, they flip the script on all of this. Officers can essentially search everyone's movement all at one time and then decide if that person's movement was interesting enough based on AI analysis. I don't know about you, but to me this is mass surveillance by default. And if and when this case ever makes it to the US Supreme Court and there's an action brought against Flock Safety and these violations, I believe this is going to be the main issue. Is it an unreasonable search to record the comings and goings of an entire city's population just in case someone drives somewhere interesting? Now, in my humble opinion, it is an unreasonable search, and this should be seen as a violation of the Fourth Amendment. But unfortunately, very few courts have covered this issue. In one case in Virginia, the ACLU sued Virginia State Police for using license plate readers as a basis to basically tail and track people all over the state. Unfortunately, the Virginia State Supreme Court ruled narrowly, saying that it was not a violation of the Fourth Amendment. My biggest criticism with the American legal system is it fails to keep up with technology as it continues to expand. And even though I don't like a lot of what happens in Europe, I can tell you we can borrow from one example in Europe which would save many of our privacy rights when it comes to this technology. The European Union recognizes privacy as a fundamental right, at least in theory. Under the EU's GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation Law, it requires explicit consent for personal data collection or sharing to take place. The US has no comprehensive federal law regulating surveillance cameras or data brokers. Here's the reality. Your driving data can be collected and shared with just about anybody if they're willing to pay for it. So now that we know Flock's AI cameras are tracking us everywhere, what exactly happens when they make a mistake? We already covered how the Aurora Police Department paid a multi-million-dollar settlement to Brittany Gillum and her kids for the wrongful arrest. But sadly, this is not an isolated incident. Around the country, there have been multiple incidents where innocent people have been targeted by these license plate readers and so-called impenetrable AI technology that has led to people being either hurt or wrongfully arrested for crimes they did not commit. For example, in New Mexico, police pulled over Jacqueline Gonzalez, a 21-year-old, while she was driving her 12-year-old sister to the park. Officers ordered them out at gunpoint and even handcuffed the 12-year-old. The reason? A license plate camera misread a 2 as a 7 on their plate and falsely flagged the car as stolen. It was a one-digit error that could have gotten both of them killed. This brings us to San Francisco, California. Denise Green was pulled over by 5 police cars, forced out at gunpoint, and made to kneel on the sidewalk, all because a license plate reader misread her plate, a 3 mistaken for an 8, or B, and indicated that her car might be stolen. She turned around and sued the city, and the city had to pay a $500,000 settlement for the incident. These stories paint a dangerous reality. When cops receive a hit on a license plate reader through this AI, They assume it's a verified hit, and what do? They take high-stakes tactics, pulling out weapons, treating someone as what AI claims they are, which could lead to someone losing their life. You say, Jeff, come on, is it really that big of a risk? I'm sure this AI is accurate, right? Here's the problem. Some studies have actually tracked the accuracy of this AI, and it's learned that mistakes can happen as much as 10% of the time for every license plate it reads. That means at least 10% of the time, innocent people are being put at risk. Children are having guns pointed at their head and put down on the sidewalk. Not only does it create trauma for what kids and adults have to go through when they've done nothing wrong, but it also creates a violation of our rights. I want you to think about how much easier this could be handled. Once again, many of these problems come down to not just the technology, but also how cops react to this technology. Imagine if they were required, either through law, which would be a good idea, or through at least police policy, to actually verify certain hits before they go nuts and treat people like they're criminals. But unfortunately, what police do is they just get a hit, they say, this is enough for me, it'll justify what I'm about to do, and they jump right into action, and they create trauma, things that cannot be undone. If it's not bad enough that cops are using this technology to track all of us, and it screws up at least 10% of the time, imagine what happens when corrupt cops get access to this technology and use it for their personal gain. In Sedgwick County, Kansas, a small town police chief by the name of Lee Nygaard became obsessed with his ex-girlfriend. How did he feed that obsession? He used the flock camera system to run her license plate by the cameras 228 times over several months. He also ran the plate of a man she started seeing. Essentially, he tracked their movements all around town via flock hits, learning where they were and when they were there. On one occasion, he even used a patrol car to physically tail them after getting a flock security alert, pulling them over and under false pretenses to see who she was with. This went on until another officer discovered what he was doing. He then resigned and ultimately lost his police certification. But I want you to understand, he was never criminally charged with stalking. And if I've ever seen a case of stalking, this is stalking. Instead, he only got charged with misuse of a police database, for which he received 18 months probation. But this is just the beginning. In Florida, a media investigation found dozens of officers abused various databases to snoop on their exes, celebrities, or people they found attractive. Imagine how easy this is to be abused by the police. Find somebody you're curious about, maybe a little obsessed with. Go ahead and enter their license plate into the flock system, start tracking them around, find out when they go to the gym, find out where they like to go for dinner, just happen to show up and hang out and introduce yourself to them. Policies and audits by the police are supposed to prevent this type of abuse. But as we know, police aren't always the best at policing themselves. And finally, think of the chilling effect that license plate readers and this technology will have on the freedom of association and speech. License plate reader data could identify who maybe actually attended a protest. Maybe there's something going on politically you don't approve of, and you believe you have a First Amendment right to exercise your right of free speech, to show, and your freedom to associate, to be able to show you are publicly taking a stance against that behavior. Cops could, as an example, after a demonstration, they could choose to retroactively search plates seen in the vicinity and build a list of attendees. And believe it or not, there's actually precedent to support cops would do this. In the 2010s, it came out that some police agencies were actually using license plate readers to record cars at places of worship and political rallies. The DEA infamously monitored a gun show and noted plates. The chilling effect, it's real. If people perceive that their every move is being recorded, they may not attend and support certain things for which they have a constitutional right to do so, and then it creates a situation in our own American system where change cannot take place. So how exactly do we stop all of this? The very first place to start is to begin to lobby and push for change in your specific state, because that's where we've had the most traction. For example, number one, let's look at Illinois, a new law that came into effect in 2023. Illinois now prohibits sharing license plate data for out-of-state abortion or immigration enforcement. It was the first law of its kind. Other states could now copy this to at least put a firewall around their residents' data for sensitive issues. What about California? California now requires all license plate reader operators to have a usage and privacy policy and allows for individuals to sue if data is misused. California also has relatively short retention in many cities. In other words, 30 days by policy by the LAPD, they must destroy the records, and has banned pure traffic enforcement cameras from being used for speeding or red light tickets by license plate readers. Which brings us to Maine, and they are perhaps the most impressive of all states so far. Maine has gone so far as to ban almost all license plate readers entirely. They allow only limited uses and force data deletion after 21 days, with criminal penalties for any company that misuses this. This becomes a gold standard for privacy that we can now advocate in all of our individual states. And finally, and most recently in 2025, that brings us to the state of Utah. Utah passed a bill by its legislature that adds penalties for misuse of license plate readers, making it a misdemeanor and allowing for the firing of officers who abuse this technology. The fastest and quickest way to stop your privacy rights from being violated is to start at the state level and start pushing your local legislators to move forward and ban the use of this technology. But what about the federal level? As of yet, unfortunately, the Supreme Court has failed to take on this issue. And I know I mentioned this earlier, but my biggest criticism about the Supreme Court is they're always about a decade or 2 decades behind on increases in technology and how they are able to violate our privacy rights. So if we can't rely on the United States Supreme Court, one interesting potential solution could be the Fourth Amendment is Not for Sale Act. This bill is extremely helpful and very important to pass because it would actually stop police officers from buying all of our data from data brokers and then turning around and feeding it into their own systems and using it to track each and every one of us. Now, here's the good news. It passed the House. It came as H.R. 4639. It was passed, but then when it was brought up to the Senate, like many other good bills, once it makes it to the Senate, it got stuck in committee. So it was never voted on. Actually, it was never debated on and never voted on. But if we make it a priority as part of what we all care about, as citizens, as Americans, this bill should be something that passes so that we can stop police, law enforcement, and a lot of what we're seeing going on right now, these agencies, from violating our privacy. And finally, if you find yourself in the horrible situation like Brittany Gillum, where they have now put you in a traffic stop and accused you of doing something you know you didn't do, it's important to know your rights and exercise those rights during that traffic stop. If cops come up to you after a so-called license plate hit, and they come at you very aggressively with guns drawn, and they want you to keep your hands up, and they want to treat you like you're an actual criminal, remember the basics here. Number 1, stay calm. Number 2, keep your hands visible, no sudden movements. Number 3, it is okay to ask, officer, why am I being stopped? What have I done wrong? They should at this point tell you that their license plate reader or data flagged your vehicle as a potential stolen vehicle, or that you may have a warrant out for your arrest. If you know that to be the case, you can say, officer, this is clearly a mistake. I'm going to ask you right now to double check that data in order to show I have done absolutely nothing wrong. And by the way, if all of this is being recorded while this is taking place, under the Barnes versus Felix ruling that we just analyzed recently, you'll also learn that if the officer acted unreasonable during this period of time, his qualified immunity can be thrown out the window. And now these traffic stop violations where they're relying upon these license plate readers can be used as a basis for you to bring a Section 1983 civil rights lawsuit against the cops. But what if the cops continue to persist and violate your rights? Well, that brings us to our third point. Do not consent to the search of your vehicle. Number 4, do not resist. And number 5, take note of everything that took place. Make sure and record everything if you can. And then finally, contact a lawyer, because if they violated your rights like they did Brittany Gillum, you may have a strong civil rights lawsuit to bring against an officer when they're relying upon this type of technology to believe you've committed a criminal act. You say, Jeff, come on, I'm not lawsuit happy, but that's not the point here. You have a constitutional right to not be unreasonably searched or seized. But those rights don't mean anything if we don't stand up for them and stop police departments from doing this. A mistake by a machine is no justification for violating your rights, and we'll only stop this bad behavior if we stand up and take it to court. And let me finally say, this is not about being pro-police or anti-police or pro-technology or anti-technology. This is about standing up for our constitutional rights, our Fourth Amendment rights in this digital age. We can have effective law enforcement and still maintain our privacy, but only if we set boundaries. Speaking of setting boundaries, did you know that cops are not only watching your license plate, but that they are also using technology to see through the walls of your home without a warrant? Check out this next video where I break down how to stop cops from seeing through walls to spy on your home. See you over there.